November 1274, the divine wind fails to blow. Instead of typhoons scattering the Mongol fleet, favorable winds carry 40,000 warriors to Japanese shores. What the samurai called kamikaze, the wind of the gods that would save them twice in our timeline, simply doesn't materialize. In this alternate history, Japan faces something it has never encountered, an enemy it cannot defeat through martial prowess alone. The greatest empire in human history, responsible for the deaths of an estimated 40 million people, sets its sights on the island nation that believed itself protected by divine providence. This is the story of how a culture built on honor, isolation, and the way of the warrior was systematically dismantled by the most efficient killing machine the medieval world had ever seen. The kamikaze was Japan's miracle. But what happens when miracles don't come? What happens when gods remain silent and the Mongols don't? To understand what befalls Japan, you must first grasp what the Mongol Empire truly was. This wasn't merely a conquering force, it was a civilizational reset button. From the Sea of Japan to the gates of Vienna, from the frozen wastes of Siberia to the jungles of Southeast Asia, the Mongols had built the largest contiguous empire in human history. Cities that resisted were erased so thoroughly that their ruins became cautionary tales whispered across generations. Genghis Khan's strategy was brutally simple: surrender immediately and pay tribute, or face total annihilation. The choice was binary: no negotiation, no mercy for the defiant. When Baghdad fell in 1258, the Tigris River ran black with ink from destroyed libraries, then red with the blood of hundreds of thousands of inhabitants. When Khwarazm resisted, entire cities were depopulated and their irrigation systems destroyed, turning fertile lands into desert that remains barren today. This was the empire knocking on Japan's door in 1274. And this time, the door would open. Imagine you're a samurai on the beaches of Hakata Bay, trained since childhood in single combat, in the sacred tradition of announcing your lineage before engaging an opponent in honorable duel. Now, imagine 40,000 Mongol and Korean warriors hitting the beach in coordinated waves, their composite bows releasing volleys of armor-piercing arrows before you can even shout your name. There is no honor here, no individual combat, no respect for tradition. The Mongols fight as a single organism, disciplined, coordinated, utterly alien to everything Japanese warfare represents. They use gunpowder explosives, terrifying the samurai horses. They employ massed cavalry charges that break defensive formations like waves against sand. Within hours of landing, the Mongol forces have established a fortified beachhead. The samurai, fighting with suicidal courage, are slaughtered by the hundreds. Their famous swords and battlefield etiquette mean nothing against an enemy that views war not as art, but as systematic extermination. By nightfall, Hakata burns, the invasion has begun. The Japanese military command faces a crisis unlike any in their history. Their entire martial philosophy is built around individual prowess, family honor, and the spiritual discipline of the warrior. But the Mongols don't care about your family name or your sword technique. Within 3 weeks, all of Kyushu, Japan's southern island, is under Mongol control. The conquest follows the pattern perfected across Asia: brutal efficiency combined with calculated terror. Cities that resist are burned completely. Those that surrender are stripped of weapons and forced to provision the Mongol army. The Mongol general, a veteran of campaigns in China and Korea, establishes a command center in Dasefu, the former administrative capital. He demands the Japanese emperor submit and pay tribute. The response from Kyoto is defiant but hollow. The Kamakura shogunate realizes too late that their forces are hopelessly outmatched. Mongol engineering corps begin constructing permanent fortifications. Shipyards are seized and expanded. This is not a raid. This is occupation. By spring of 1275, 50,000 additional Mongol and Chinese troops arrive. The conquest of mainland Japan is imminent. The Japanese leadership faces an impossible calculation. The narrow straits between Kyushu and the main island of Honshu could be defended. But for how long? The Mongols now control Korean shipyards and have conscripted Chinese naval expertise. They can build ships faster than Japan can sink them. The samurai class, perhaps 20,000 strong across all of Japan, faces an empire that can field armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Kublai Khan, now firmly established as the Great Khan after his Civil War victory in 1264, sees Japan as the final jewel in his consolidation of East Asia. He commits resources that dwarf anything Japan can muster. By 1276, the Mongol fleet crosses to Honshu. The landings are devastating. Unlike the first invasion, the Mongols now understand Japanese tactics and terrain. They've trained specifically to counter samurai warfare. They employ Japanese defectors as guides. They know which castles can be bypassed and which must be taken. The Kamakura shogunate's armies meet them at every opportunity and are systematically destroyed. By 1277, Mongol forces stand before Kamakura, the shogunate's capital and the heart of samurai power. The city, built in a natural fortress of hills, has never fallen to an enemy, but it has never faced this enemy. The Mongols bring Chinese siege engineers who have reduced far greater fortifications. They bring gunpowder weapons that can shatter castle walls. They bring the patience to starve a city for months if necessary. The siege lasts 70 days. Inside, the samurai leadership debates the unthinkable: surrender. Some argue for negotiating tributary status, preserving the emperor and some measure of autonomy, as Korea had done. Others demand a final, glorious stand, death before dishonesty. When the walls finally fall, not through heroic assault, but through systematic demolition, the Mongol terms are presented. The shogunate will be dissolved. The emperor will remain as a symbolic figurehead, but all real power transfers to Mongol administrators. Japan will pay annual tribute in silver, ships, and conscripts for future Mongol campaigns. The samurai class will be systematically disbanded. What follows is not merely political conquest, but cultural transformation. The Mongols, having learned from their Chinese conquests, implement a dual strategy: preserve what's useful, eliminate what's threatening. The emperor remains in Kyoto, but his role becomes purely ceremonial under Mongol supervision. The samurai class, the warrior aristocracy that has defined Japanese culture for centuries, is methodically dismantled. Their weapons are confiscated. Their lands are redistributed to Mongol and Korean administrators. Many are forcibly relocated. Those who resist are executed not individually, but with their entire families, the Mongol method of ensuring obedience. The Bushido code, the way of the warrior, becomes a memory whispered in secret. Buddhist temples are left intact. The Mongols are religiously tolerant, but Shinto shrines, with their focus on Japanese uniqueness and divine protection, are systematically destroyed. The sacred mirror, sword, and jewel, symbols of imperial divinity, are seized and sent to Kublai Khan's court as trophies. The psychological impact is devastating. If the gods couldn't save Japan, were they ever real? Over the following decades, Japan becomes fully integrated into the Mongol economic system. This brings unexpected changes. The Mongol Empire, at its height, facilitates the greatest exchange of knowledge and trade in human history, the Pax Mongolica. Japanese craftsmen find their techniques traveling the Silk Road. Persian mathematics reaches Japanese scholars. Chinese printing technology revolutionizes Japanese literature. But this comes at an immeasurable cost. Japanese identity, so long built on isolation and uniqueness, is subsumed into a vast, multicultural empire. The Japanese language acquires thousands of Mongol and Chinese loanwords. Traditional architecture gives way to continental styles. Perhaps most significantly, Japan's warrior culture, destined in our timeline to dominate until 1945, is snuffed out before reaching full flower. The tea ceremony, Zen Buddhism, haiku poetry, all the refined arts that would emerge from samurai culture in our timeline, either never develop or evolve in completely different directions. When Kublai Khan dies in 1294, Japan is just another tributary province, no different from Korea or any Chinese region. Consider the implications cascading through history. Without an independent Japan, there is no Tokugawa shogunate isolating the islands for 250 years. No unique Japanese response to Western imperialism in the 19th century. No Meiji Restoration. No industrialized Asian power challenging European colonialism. The Japan that would stun the world by defeating Russia in 1905, that would build carriers and zeros. None of it exists. Instead, when the Mongol Empire fractures in the 14th century, Japan becomes a contested territory between Chinese dynasties and emerging Korean kingdoms. Some historians in this timeline argue that an independent Japan might have re-emerged, but cultures, once extinguished, rarely resurrect. The samurai philosophy, the Shinto beliefs, the very concept of Japanese exceptionalism, all lost in the 13th century. Even the language might have evolved into a Chinese dialect. By the time Europeans arrive in East Asia during the Age of Exploration, they find not a mysterious, isolated empire, but just another former Mongol province with a complex, hybrid culture, neither fully Chinese nor recognizably Japanese. In our actual timeline, the kamikaze, the divine wind, saved Japan twice. In 1274 and again in 1281, typhoons destroyed Mongol fleets and convinced the Japanese that their gods protected them. This conviction shaped Japanese culture for 7 centuries. It fostered a belief in Japanese uniqueness and divine favor that persisted until atomic bombs shattered it in 1945. But imagine growing up in a world where that wind never blew, where the gods were silent, where the greatest warriors in Japan fell before an enemy that fought without honor or mercy. Sometimes, history turns on weather patterns. Sometimes, the difference between cultural survival and extinction is nothing more than a storm. That does or doesn't form. The Mongols eventually failed to hold their empire together. Internal conflicts always fractured their conquests. But by then, the damage was done. You cannot resurrect a culture once its bearers have been scattered, its artifacts burned, its beliefs forbidden. The Japan we know, land of the samurai, of cherry blossoms and ancient tradition, survived by pure chance. The next time you see Mount Fuji or a katana, remember, there's a timeline where neither means anything to anyone, where the wind didn't blow and the rising sun finally set.